we're moving right along, getting smoother each time. So Todd Ryan, he's going to be hosting the next panel. If people are excited for this one, so I really appreciate your support of Handshake, and also, and you're well known and do a lot in the traditional domain space, and your spaces are great. Everybody appreciates what you do, and I'm going to pass it off to you to host this amazing panel, which we're all excited about. So thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for everything. And everybody, it's a pleasure to be here, HandyCon 2025. My name's Todd Ryan. I'm more of a traditional domain investor, but I couldn't keep my hands off HNS, off Handshake, when it was first developed. But long story short, I formed in '96 American Business Capital, also ABC Productions. And that's how you can contact me. I'm glad Mike was talking about networking. It is important to connect with each other. You can go to my Handshake name, Todd, TODD, .hns.to. It'll take you to ABC Productions, and then you can just send me an email. But I wanted to bring that up first. More recently, I did co-found a company with Chad, one of my panelists here, one of my co-hosts, called Pay Now. We're really excited about that because it's a crypto payment platform, and we're hoping to incorporate some things with Handshake here in the future. But so that's briefly about me. I'm an investment advisor, Handshake advocate, and more a traditional domain investor. And I host some, like Mike said, a domain name law show. And today we're going to talk about the next round of ICANN. So very interesting. And some sales that one of the co-panelists, Paul, had last year. So I want to throw it to you, Chad. Why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll get rolling.
Don't forget to introduce Paul, too. Little monkey over there. I'm Chad. I go by EDAD. I've been in the domain space almost going on 30 years, 28 years. So we have a portfolio of 20-some thousand .coms, trying to turn those into things called E-Corps, autonomous electronic corporations. Got into HNS about 2 months after the Genesis Mint. We own about, I think, 2,000 HNS names. So I've been kind of just playing around with a lot of digital real estate. That's our niche. So digital real estate. So it's good to see the HNS community is kind of going. And again, hats off to Mike again for running this. And so thank you very much, Mike.
And Paul, are you there? What's up?
Yeah, what's going on? Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Fantastic. Hope you guys are doing good. Thank you, Mike, Ann, and everyone else for putting on this show. It's amazing. So far, I learned a lot so far just about a sovereign identity for autonomous agents by Jihan, the hard fork coming up, the proposal. That's kind of new for me as well. So this is all good stuff. Yeah, doing good. Investor in digital assets as well as real estate. And the fact that this is an experimental project really excites me, that we're here 5 years later still experimenting. And I have about 750 names, got a few staked, and have some registrations as well. So that's the avenue I've taken down at Handshake.
Hey, we're going to get rolling by talking about that, Paul. Okay, so I have a few hundred names. Paul has almost 1,000. Chad has a couple thousand. We're domain investors, decentralized domain investors, traditional domain investors. But Paul, I wanted to start with you. Talk about, so you had a really big sale last year. I think probably the biggest sale of a Handshake name. I wanted you to talk about that, and then also talk about a little bit about the staking you've done and what proceeds, what money you've made from it, and how you feel about staking, if you plan on staking some more names in the future.
Absolutely. So if you remember, it was the 4-year anniversary in February of 2024, labeled The Happening. That's when like 78,000 Alexa names that were reserved were released out to the public. Well, I mean, they were able for anybody to go open at that point. And they were. Some of the names that I got at that point were .king, .queen, .login, and so forth. And the way that one went down, the sale that you're referring to, I think it was the fourth largest sale, but it was for 1 million HNS, and I had acquired it. So I put in 23,000 Handshake as my lockup, and that's it. No blind, none of that BS. It was just 23K Handshake, and then change somewhere around there. The next highest one, I think, was 20K was a lockup. Oops. That was the lockup that I could see, and it ended up that only 10,000 of that was actually towards it. 10,000 of it was a blind. So I ended up paying 10,000 Handshake for it. which was, I think Handshake was at right under 4 cents, so about $400. I said, I like my 100X on this. Let's put it up for $1 million Handshake. And if I can knock out 40K on this, that'd be good. Little I know, by November, the price of Handshake really fluctuated. It went down to under 1 cent. And so at that point, it was like, all right. And just wake up one morning to an email, because I didn't reprice my name. It was still $1 million HNS. And I wake up to an email saying that it's sold. It came out to about $9,600 at the time. By the time I converted it in November, I waited it to go up to about 3 cents. So not a bad return, from $400 to about 30 grand return on that name. Yeah, you're on mute still, Todd, by the way. But yeah.
Mention the name.
Oh, the name is .king. I thought I mentioned that. The name was .king. And my idea for that is, as soon as I got that, I got .queen as well. I said, I'm going to launch it so that only people that get a .king name are going to be able to register a .queen name. So you'd have to have a .king for a kind of play gamification on that. But, at the end of it, I said, let me put it up for $1 million. Let's see what happens. And next thing, the damn thing sold. So there goes that idea. .queen still available, ladies and gentlemen.
No, Paul, that's great. I was going to mention before you just talk about staking, and then we're going to talk about the next round and this possible .HNS extension. So a friend, you guys know him, he's a well-known in the traditional domain space, and also a Handshake investor, Michael Seiger. He created an academy for domain investors in the traditional space, very well-known, but he recently sold DevNet, Handshake name, for 10,000 HNS. And I know he picked that up 4 years ago in 2021 for 100 HNS. But it is nice to get offers. I like the name-based system. I look forward. I was saying, Alex, I saw him in the chat. I've never met him, but I know he's with Namebase, going to give a presentation on Friday. Really looking forward to that. But it's nice to get these offers, and you can't help it. Sometimes you're selling 10,000 HNS now is about $90. You hate to get rid of some great names for low prices, but it's fun to move them as well. So before we get on to the next topic, quickly, Paul, what have you staked, and has it been worth it?
Yeah, I have a few names staked, I think 3 to be exact. So .click, CLIQ, and I have a site that I've developed. Let me just put it up here and say, just a very basic landing page. It's kind of like a take on Clubhouse. It's ClickHouse. For those with a higher IQ, of course. But and it's a .CLIQ TLD, so that's one of them. The other one is .diva. That thing's got about 32 names that are registered. Gian said a great thing this early on is, what are you doing? You're surviving. At this point, what do those registrations do that are staked? It basically pays for your renewals for the rest of your names. You got about 40 names that are registered. You're getting your Handshake. And it's a thing of beauty that sometimes we just take all this for granted. The fact that we have a beautiful bidding process. It's like a poker game, the blind element of it, staking, what we're discussing right now. To me, staking, it's the Temu version of being a registry operator. That's what it is. The names don't resolve, which we're going to get to in a second as soon as we start talking about HNS. I'm really excited about talking about that. But that is the number one issue that you talk to anybody right now. What is the issue for the mainstream is that it does not resolve. So anyway, but the fact that we have the buying, selling domains, the marketplace is already built in, instant payment, transfer of domains, swapping from Handshake into BTC, instantaneous results. All these aspects are fantastic. But they're already built into the system. So all this stuff really excites me about it. Staking part of it, like I said, I have this name that's set up for one of my names. It's organic. I'm not spending any time on it. I'd love to continue to build a community, but I want to be able to reward my community members. And before we just get into it, if you don't mind, this is like my thought process, the way I look at it, like perfect example of an opportunity, right? We're building it at a very foundation layer with Handshake. You have a great TLD, you stake it, which is kind of it is already done. The entire process of registering names is already automated. Namecheap already has that built in. What we build on our end is a login system that only people that have a .click name are able to log into our system. So in order to access my community, you have to have a .click name. Once they log in, now you can reward, all these meme coins that are going on out here. Well, how about you launch a meme coin that once they log in, they've already paid the Handshake. You've already got your reward there. You can share some of that reward with them in the forms of a meme coin. I'm just using that as an example. There's so many different aspects of this that we can go down, but yeah, that's what I'm looking at. Chad, go ahead, man. I've taken up.
Well, hold on. I want to wear. Chad's not wearing his pay now hat. Yeah, Chad. Listen, Chad. There was a mention earlier. Jahan was mentioning earlier about agents interacting with agents, and I know you've been working a lot on that. We're getting ready to talk about the next round, but before we get into that, don't mean to throw you off, but where is it at? I mean, you've been working on that exactly as well. Agents interacting with other agents, payments. I mean, and everything. But just to talk about that just for a second. Agents working with agents.
Well, I mean, that was the definition of an agent, right? So I think it's you got to look at analog versus digital. So fiat is technically analog. It is digital. You get digital dollars, but it's still papered $100. So like with agents, you have to be digital native. So domains are digital native. HNS is digital native, right? That's where I think HNS just has to kind of continue the narrative, start to keep the grind, and these new technologies like agents and are coming in to layer on top of other digital networks. And for automation and transaction, again, you can take an example of Ethereum with smart contracts. So I think HNS has its niche. I think when we first launched, everybody was, oh, it's competing with A or B or C, and really just different philosophies. But when you build an autonomous digital entity, where you want to call it an agent or whatever you want to call it, it needs a digital network. And so HNS is a digital native network of identity locations. So again, now when you can bring in wallets, you can bring different things, you can start playing with a lot with identity. And I think that's where HNS is going to have a nice positioning in X amount of years, being able to do automated transactions between digital identities, which is again a handshake name.
Yeah.
So
I know Mike loves to hear that because he was talking about people want to do some things through traditional DNS, but what you just mentioned, Chad, Handshake is truly decentralized, but set up perfect for agent to agent, meaning there needs to be no centralized hand involved in this. Anyway, I want to get to, there was something I wanted to mention. Oh, I hope later on today, I know Scott Florsk and Tom Barrett are going to be talking about some things, and Tom over at Encirca does what Paul was talking about, allowing for you to stake names and do that. But I'm assuming they're going to touch on that. So I really look forward to the rest of the sessions today. What we were mainly going to speak on today was in ICANN's next round, would it be beneficial to Handshake community to apply for the .HNS extension and the traditional naming system, and how could it benefit the community? How can it bridge the community? I think it would be fantastic because it would be sort of then we could work on sort of a hybrid, not necessarily a solution, but some type of hybrid format or platform that would solve the browser problem. Obviously, we could, and the folks with Handshake names would be able to register their .HNS name. There's some issues that I see, but first, Paul, I know you've given a lot of thought to this, and we're going to talk about how do we form a consortium to do this, the expenses involved. But with regards to just some pure benefits to it, Paul, first, why do you think it would be attractive to apply for this extension and hopefully obtain it?
I mean, I think it solves some of the main problems that we have in getting to the mainstream adoption at this point. Name collision being number one. Well, let's start at the very basic, is resolving. With .HNS, we're going to be able to resolve just like a traditional DNS name. And when we're talking about .HNS, we're talking about just the resolving part. Excuse me. We're not talking about the registration. The registration is going to continue the exact same way it is right now. The resolving part, that's what we would be paying for, is the resolving part of it. That's one thing. So now name collision is no longer there, because in order to resolve, you would have to have your name.hns. It's a one of one. It's an NFT, right? There's no other name that would kind of like solve that thing. Interoperability that goes along hand in hand with it. But just going back to owning that, what is it that you're owning? You're not. What I'm trying to say is, like, let's say that we go out there and buy the H. First of all, the biggest problem is it's not the one-time fee. I think we can get people to do that. Who is going to pay the renewals, the annual renewal for the DNS? Who's going to do the maintenance of that? And how are we going to get enough funds for that? That's like the bigger concern of it, is how do we go about that? But if the numbers make sense, if there's 13 million registrations on HNS, if we can get 10,000 names to resolve at $10, that's 100,000 names to resolve it at $10. That's a million right there. I don't know if there's 100,000 names that would want to resolve on there. That's the question that needs to be answered. Is going down that line. But what are your thoughts?
I think you would have to get that in with the hard fork, and I think that proposal needs to get in now into the hard fork, and then at the same, knowing that when the hard fork happens, that you're going to be extending it into the root zone, the HNS strategy. So I would definitely because it's going to be about timing too, right? So I don't know if and when the hard fork would actually occur, but I think that's something that should be proposed in and during the hard fork.
Can you explain a little bit on that? Because to me, it has nothing to do with the hard fork. You're building this system on your own. You're basically resolving, very similar to HNS.to, it resolves handshake names. Well, eliminate the .to. Nobody wants that. Now you have .hns just resolving. It's resolving on .hns. Am I missing something there? Can you explain?
No, I think I'm just saying I remember when they JJ and them talked about the hard fork, Zipkin and them talked about the hard fork in their condo. I was like, that's going to be an uphill battle, right? Soft fork, hard fork. I'm just saying, even if a co-op or whatever you want to call it, a syndicate acquires the .HNS for, let's say, $250,000 with a $50,000 maintenance fee a year, right? So it's still, you can set up a gateway, like a resolver, like an automated virtual machine, let's put it that way, right? That can just syndicate through on top of the chain. So I think you need to be in alignment with the hard fork changes with the new architecture of getting into the root zone. That's all I'm saying, is whether they're separate or not separate, that's where you can get distribution in the root zone browsers right away if you have a better alignment with the chain. So I'm just saying that would be something to explore.
Yeah, and someone's talking about, I'm not sure if this is the questions that they're saying in the chat. It's a little too fast for me, but you're not proving ownership with this. Some of the characteristics, if you look at it, are very similar to ENS. Anyone can go in and renew an ENS name. If Todd has his ENS name, I can go renew his name. It should be similar here, where anyone can go in and renew that name. Something of, now, I'm not sure what the guidelines are with ICANN and so forth, so there's, but
there's also, remember, 800, the developer, right? They airdropped whatever the percentage to the open source developer community, and nobody claimed it, right? So they're proposing those tokens go back into somewhere else. And that would be a good case study to try and apply for some of those HNS that didn't go to developers, to go to a co-op fund to acquire distribution in the root zone through .HNS in 2 years, whatever the time frame is. That's all I'm saying, is I think it would be more aligned doing it when a hard fork occurs.
Yeah, and I like the idea.
Paul, I'm sure you're seeing like me. So everybody's touching on great stuff in the chat. Meaning, this really needs to be a deep discussion, because there's all sorts of. I can come up in my own mind. I see Scott and Tom were making some comments. Right, it would be no squatters, because you could only get the name if you had the handshake name. But like Tom mentioned, that doesn't mean that everybody with a handshake name is going to want their .HNS. What you're talking about, Paul, is just having it resolve. But there's going to there would be issues too. Say you have the HNS name and then you let it expire, but now you have the .HNS name. There are just so many issues that need to be addressed. But Paul, I'm like you. It's all about the money first. First, we got to find out, okay, who got the money? Chad was right on. It's going to be $250,000. It's going to be more than that, but $250,000 to get rolling. And then, of course, who's going to handle the application? And we already have that taken care of. That's going to be TLD Strategies. I got a partnership with Jeff Newman, who was successful, got 400 extensions in the last round. Okay. So, I mean, we know how to go about professionally applying and working with ICANN, and then getting the right back end providers, and then managing and complying and moving forward as a registry. But still, what about the dough, and what about putting the money together? And quickly, I'll say, well, of course, we're going to go to the community and Handshake advocates and people that just invest in domains. There's a lot of guys in the traditional space. Well, like say Andrew Rosner, who invested in Handshake, Unstoppable, invest in a bunch of stuff. And so there's going to be some people who aren't really, I say, involved in the community that are on this call, but interested in participating in that sense. And I was going to mention one of our first supporters, Erwin, down at hns.au, is already ready to contribute. And I said, we've been discussing this, Paul and I have, for a year, it seems like, maybe even more. Well, when Chad and Paul and I did another show, we always talked about it. Well, now the shit's about ready to hit the fan, meaning it's really not too soon to start getting involved, especially to get the money in order. Paul, what were you going to mention? I mean, we got another 5 minutes left, or I guess I want to say, follow me on, the only thing I think is follow me on Twitter. So when I can put together a space of when we can really solely discuss, this issue or the idea of securing .hns in the next round. I'll have lawyers there too, to make sure that, so if we got the money, can we get it? And about really some of the operational and managerial things that are going to happen if you did happen to secure .hns. But Paul, what did you want to mention?
Oh, no, what you were just mentioning right now, let's say the domain doesn't get renewed and so forth. Well, I mean, this is working as a resolving solution. And that means that once you try to log in, and basically you wouldn't be able to resolve it. That's all that would happen there. The second part of it, it doesn't have to be done. Initially, when you and I started having these conversations, I was being really secretive about it. At the end of the day, it doesn't have to be .hns. When we're sending emails, no one cares about TCP/IP. They just want to make sure that email gets through. But the naming on it, HNS may be not the best idea. It should be maybe something a little more user-friendly, a little more mainstream. And it could be multiple of them. We could have .hns, you could have another one doing it, and you could resolve on multiple of them. There's no reason why it should just be one. You're just using this as a base layer.
Paul, sorry to interrupt. You can do that now. Zipkin created that. You can do it now. You can do it now on a TLD root zone right now. Zipkin created that browser thing. So it's not that the capabilities aren't already there. I think it's the identity and getting the distribution in one swath on the centralized root zone server is there. And if the economic numbers match, you'll get a bunch of Bitcoin maxis, kind of that, right? Because it is a kind of a sister Bitcoin spinoff, I would say. So it just has to be economically there, and it has to have opportunity there. But the technical capabilities have already been shown that are already out there. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's not interrupting. You're absolutely right, is there, but there's friction there, Chad. No one wants to download the plugin. No one wants to take that extra step. It has to be grandma proof. At this point, grandma has to be mom proof at this point, for it to get through. Like if your mom doesn't understand this, it's tough to get the average mainstream person who's already too busy trying to handle a basic website for them to understand this. And one thing needs to happen. I think a lot of as we see more and more things happening in the real world with confiscation of websites and the censorship and so forth, I think that will automatically create adoption here on this side of the world.
Yeah, Perplexity is creating their own browser, right? You never know. New browsers that are coming up that are AI native that might take the ethos. You might have an automated agent that creates its own that wants a decentralized naming system, right? I mean, we're thinking humans have to create this stuff. In 3 to 5 years, you might have agents building their own systems, and this might be the system that kind of calls out to a potential future agent that builds itself. That'd be interesting to watch. I could see that happening in 5 years.
Yeah, I only got a minute left. I wanted to say about the adoption. That's the main reason I think to apply, and I want to answer some of the questions in the chat, but we don't even have time. Applying for this, why do it? Some people are questioning, why would you even want to do it? Well, you would want to do it to speed up the adoption of Handshake. And then, of course, it's really a bridge, and eventually we can get rid of that bridge. Once these tools, like in the fantastic session before this, once we have more tools to be able to build sites and the traditional system is not needed, well, yeah, we want to have an alt root that's not related, that's not controlled by ICANN. We're just talking about, in the meantime, is it too expensive? And I don't think it is. Because I know there's ways to make money if a registry is operated properly, if an extension does have a little bit of adoption. Paul was talking about hundreds of thousands of names. With 10,000, regardless, I'm going to finish by saying if it wasn't HNS somebody's applying for, you're going to see in this next round, there's going to be a lot of applications for different extensions. And if an extension is, say, secured, that somebody wins an extension, if they have a nice marketing plan and they get 10, 20,000, 50,000 registrations, that's a successful extension if they're really efficient. Basically, it can be a money maker as well. So there's a lot to talk about with the next round and applying for gTLDs, specifically Handshake. And I'll reach out to Mike and let him know here's when we're going to have a session about it. And then a lot of us can get together and talk about it.
If you can solve the distribution problem in HNS, you'll be a millionaire.
Yeah, I just want to say, this is the beauty of it. It's optional. It's a way to appease the maxis out there that don't want to have anything to do with ICANN. It's completely optional to resolve your names via .HNS on ICANN. You're not forced to. So if you pay the fee, that's the only time it resolves. So that's all I wanted to get in. Yeah, great chat, guys. Yeah,
awesome.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, it's just definitely inspiring. Lots of chat, lots of conversations here. Seems like a lot of. Now, the hardest thing about a decentralized community is getting everybody to agree, right? I guess democracy in general, right? Versus authoritarianism, maybe, or I don't know.
I know you need to move on, Mike, but yeah, we're not going to get everybody to agree. And Paul just said it. Yeah, not everybody has to participate. It's like only some, but I mean, certainly you want the community to want it. And that's what we're going to do. We got to get indications of interest of really, and also do some troubleshooting on potential but mostly want to protect it so somebody else doesn't get it as well. But how do you just spend $300,000 to protect from somebody else?
Yeah, and the next was just making sure everybody saw in his chat he turned down a 15 million offer on Q. So he's trying to say could have been a bigger one, but he didn't even want to accept it just to get that out there. His request to state that. But this is a great one. Thanks, Todd, Paul, and Chad. Edad for sharing. Oh, there he is. Oh, he's got the shirt. He's got the sweatshirt. There he is. No more monkey. Here we go. Back to
all right, guys. Have a good one.
Awesome, man.
See you guys. Have a great day.
Thanks so much. Yep.
This event wouldn't be possible without our amazing sponsors. Our bronze sponsors, D-Web Foundation, .x, our community sponsors, Handshake Australia, Namebase, Decentralizers, HNS,